I knew something was off the moment I stepped through the glass doors of Wilson Engineering. After 17 years, you develop a sixth sense about these things. The receptionist, Maggie, avoided my eyes, unusual for a woman who greeted me by name every morning since 2007. The office carried that peculiar stillness that only comes when something significant is brewing. "Morning, Maggie," I said, setting my thermos on her desk like I did every Friday. "Coffee smells great today." "Oh, thanks, Tom," she mumbled, busying herself with paperwork that suddenly required her complete attention. "There are, some visitors in the conference room with Mr. Peterson." I nodded, noticing 3 unfamiliar luxury sedans in the executive parking spots through the window. Not our usual clients. Those typically drove pickup trucks or sensible SUVs. These were corporate cars, the kind driven by people who made decisions about other people's livelihoods without ever getting their hands dirty. Taking the elevator to the 3rd floor, I passed the wall of project photos where my face appeared in at least a dozen ribbon-cutting ceremonies. The Riverside Dam retrofit of 2012. My first project as lead engineer. The Harrison Bridge expansion that came in under budget and saved the county millions. The emergency repairs after the flood of 2019 that kept our town from losing water service for weeks. I remembered that flood vividly. 3 days without sleep, standing knee-deep in muddy water, directing crews while redesigning the intake system on the fly. The mayor had called me a hero. Peterson had given me a bonus. Now the same Peterson couldn't look me in the eye when I passed his office. "Tom." Julie from accounting waved me down. "I was just coming to find you. Mr. Peterson wants to see you in the main conference room." Now. I checked my watch. 8:17 a.m. "I've got the team status meeting at 8:30. He said immediately. Her voice dropped. "I'm really sorry, Tom." The conference room door felt unusually heavy as I pushed it open. Peterson sat at the far end, flanked by 2 men and a woman in suits I didn't recognize. The woman had a leather portfolio open in front of her. One of the men, young with the hungry look of someone who considered kindness a weakness, was tapping away on a tablet. "Tom, thanks for joining us," Peterson said with forced cheerfulness. "These folks are from Westridge Capital. They've recently acquired a controlling interest in Wilson Engineering." "I wasn't aware we were for sale," I said, remaining standing despite the empty chair they'd left for me. The younger man spoke without looking up. "Most employees aren't consulted about ownership transitions, Mr. Jenkins. Tom has been with us for 17 years, Peterson added quickly. He's led our engineering department for the past 12. "Precisely why we're having this conversation," said the woman, sliding a document across the table. "We've conducted a thorough assessment of operational efficiency." I didn't touch the paper. In my peripheral vision, I could see my team gathering in our usual meeting room across the hall, checking their watches, wondering where I was. "We're restructuring the engineering department," the older man finally spoke. His voice reminded me of my doctor delivering bad news about my cholesterol. Clinical detachment masked as concern. "Your position has been identified as redundant." "Redundant," I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. "Your compensation package is, frankly, disproportionate to market rates," the younger man chimed in, finally looking up from his tablet with a half-smile. 3 junior engineers can do your job at about 60% of your current salary costs." He actually chuckled, as if he'd made a clever observation instead of dismantling my career. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. 17 years. Over half my professional life. I'd postponed my daughter's birthday party to finish the county reservoir proposal. I'd taken calls at 2 a.m. during the Mitchell Street water main break. I'd built this department from 4 people to 23. "You'll find the severance details on page 3, the woman continued. "It's quite generous, considering. 2 months' salary, continuation of benefits through the end of the quarter. We'll need your key card and company devices before you leave today." Peterson at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Tom's been invaluable too." "The transition plan is already in place," the younger man interrupted. "We've identified team members who can absorb the essential functions." I thought about the custom software I'd developed for our water treatment monitoring systems. The proprietary calculations for load-bearing assessments that only existed in my project notes. The relationships with city officials built over hundreds of meetings and shared crises. The undocumented workarounds for equipment that should have been replaced years ago but kept running because I personally maintain them. Human resources will assist with your exit process, the woman said, closing her portfolio with a snap that sounded like a judge's gavel. We wish you all the best in your future endeavors. They expected yelling, perhaps. Bargaining. Threats. Instead, I straightened my shoulders and nodded once. I'll clear my desk. Walking back through the office felt like moving underwater. Faces turned toward me with questions I couldn't answer. I methodically packed 17 years into a cardboard box. Family photos, my engineering awards, reference books, the stress ball my daughter had given me when I made department head. As I removed the pictures from my wall, I uncovered the building schematics for the municipal water system, marked up in my handwriting with annotations no one else would understand. I hesitated, then left them there. Let them figure it out. Sarah from my team appeared at my door, confusion etched on her face. Tom, what's happening? Everyone's waiting for the meeting. There's been a change of plans, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You should talk to Peterson. I didn't wait for the elevator this time, taking the stairs with my box of belongings. Maggie's eyes widened as I placed my key card on her desk without a word. The spring air hit me as I walked to my car, parked in the same spot I'd used for over a decade. Only then did I notice the maintenance crew installing a new sign at my parking space, reserved for Director of Engineering. They already had my replacement lined up. As I placed my box in the trunk, I wondered if the new director knew what they were inheriting. A system built on my knowledge, my experience, my middle-of-the-night inspiration. I drove away without looking back, but one thought kept circling in my mind. Did they really think the system would run without me? The first weekend of unemployment hit me like a physical weight. After pulling into my driveway that Friday, I sat in my car for nearly an hour, unable to move. How would I tell Linda? What would I say to the kids? The cardboard box on my passenger seat, 17 years reduced to personal trinkets, seemed to mock me. When I finally entered our modest suburban home, Linda took one look at me standing in the entryway at 10:30 in the morning and knew. "Oh, Tom," she whispered, setting down the laundry basket she'd been carrying. "They didn't." I nodded, my throat too tight for words. She wrapped her arms around me, and for the first time since that conference room, I felt the dam break. I hadn't cried since my father's funeral 12 years ago. That night I couldn't sleep. While Linda breathed softly beside me, I pulled out the personnel manual I'd never had reason to study and pored over the severance section by the dim light of my reading lamp. 2 months' salary wouldn't go far, not with Megan's college tuition payment coming due and the roof repairs we'd been postponing. Saturday morning, I sat at our kitchen table searching job listings while pretending to read the newspaper whenever Linda walked by. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, my former team lead. "Total chaos here. New guys can't access the Riverside monitoring system. Peterson asking where documentation is. Miss you already." I set the phone down without responding. What could I say? Part of me felt vindicated. They were already discovering what they'd lost. Another part felt hollow. Those systems were my legacy, and watching them falter gave me no joy. By Sunday afternoon, 3 more colleagues had reached out. Mike from maintenance reported that the new director had called an emergency weekend meeting. The county water authority was questioning a pressure anomaly in the north sector. Precisely the kind of issue I'd handled dozens of times with a manual adjustment to the algorithmic controls I'd designed. "You should write a consulting contract," Linda suggested over Sunday dinner, after I'd shared the updates with her. "Charge them triple your hourly rate." "It's not about the money," I replied, pushing mashed potatoes around my plate. "No," she agreed, "but respect should come with a price tag. You're worth more than they realized." That night I created a LinkedIn profile, something I'd never needed before. Within hours, 2 former clients had connected, expressing shock at my departure from Wilson. One mentioned a project that might need my expertise. Monday morning felt strange. The first time in nearly 2 decades I hadn't dressed for the office. I wandered through our house, feeling like a visitor in my own life. In the garage, I found Megan's bicycle with its slipped chain, something she'd asked me to fix weeks ago that I'd been too busy to handle. I knelt down, working the chain back onto the sprocket, adjusting the tension. The simple act of fixing something broken loosened something in my chest. I moved on to the leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, then the sticky window in the den. By noon, I'd repaired 5 household items I'd been neglecting for months. That's when my phone rang, an unfamiliar number with our area code. "Is this Thomas Jenkins?" a woman asked. "Speaking. This is Marlene Davis from Riverside County Public Works. We've got a situation with the reservoir monitoring system, and your name keeps coming up as the person who designed it. Would you be available for a consultation?" I paused, thinking of the system I'd built from scratch. The countless hours debugging code, the all-nighters ensuring it worked flawlessly. "I'm available," I said, "but I'm no longer with Wilson Engineering. I'd be consulting independently." "That's fine," she replied, not missing a beat. "How soon can you come in? We're looking at potential regulatory issues if we can't resolve this." After hanging up, I sat at our kitchen table and created a simple one-page business plan. Jenkins Engineering Consultancy at the top. Below, I outlined services focused on water management systems, infrastructure integrity, and knowledge transfer processes, the very things Wilson had deemed expendable. Linda found me there an hour later, surrounded by notes. She read over my shoulder, then squeezed my arm. "This is it, isn't it?" she said. "The blessing in disguise I mentioned." "Maybe," I admitted. "Feels different. Like I'm taking back control." Tuesday morning, I converted our rarely used guest room into a modest home office. Nothing fancy, just my old desk from the basement, a decent chair, and a dedicated phone line. I created business cards at the local print shop and registered a domain name. By Wednesday, I was sitting across from Marlene Davis and 2 engineers at the county offices, explaining how the monitoring system interfaces worked. Information that existed nowhere in Wilson's official documentation. "We tried contacting your former company," one of the engineers said. "They sent someone who spent 3 hours looking at the system before admitting he didn't understand how it was calibrated." I couldn't help a small smile. The calibration metrics are based on historical data patterns I developed over a decade. Without the context, the numbers look arbitrary. As I drove home that afternoon with my first consulting check in my pocket, I noticed a social media update from Wilson Engineering. A glossy photo of the new engineering team, including the 3 juniors who were supposedly my replacements. Young, eager faces gathered around a conference table, captioned with corporate platitudes about fresh perspectives and innovative approaches. What the photo didn't show was the growing stack of system alerts, the confused emails from longtime clients, or the institutional knowledge walking out the door with every senior staff member they deemed too costly. I felt a strange sense of peace as I pulled into my driveway. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of Wilson's infrastructure on my shoulders. Tomorrow, I had 2 more consultations scheduled, both from former clients who'd tracked me down. The system was already proving it couldn't run without me. But perhaps it was time to build something new, something truly mine, from the ground up. My home office gradually transformed from a hastily repurposed guest room into a legitimate workspace. Linda helped me select a professional-looking bookshelf where I displayed my engineering certifications and reference materials. We found an ergonomic chair on sale, and I splurged on a dual-monitor setup that made reviewing technical drawings much easier. Each small addition felt like another brick in the foundation of my new life. The first month of consulting brought in enough to replace my lost salary, but the true value came in rediscovering my passion for engineering. Without corporate bureaucracy and endless meetings, I could focus on solving the actual problems. My phone rang constantly, mostly former clients who'd tracked me down through word of mouth. "We heard you're on your own now," they'd say. "We've got this situation." One morning in early June, I received a call from a small manufacturing company in the next county over. Their production line kept experiencing water pressure fluctuations that their current engineers couldn't resolve. "We're not a big operation," the plant manager, Dave Simmons, explained when I arrived at their facility. "Can't afford the big engineering firms, but this issue is costing us thousands in downtime." The problem turned out to be relatively simple. Improper valving causing pressure resonance in their industrial water system, but one that required experience to diagnose. I had it fixed by lunchtime. "What do we owe you?" Dave asked as we watched the production line running smoothly. I handed him my invoice. A quarter of what Wilson would have charged for a full day's consultation. "That's it." He looked genuinely surprised. "Wilson quoted us 3 times this just to come look at the problem." "I don't have their overhead," I explained. "Just me and my expertise." Dave shook my hand firmly. We'll be calling you for our next phase expansion. And I'm telling our friends at Lakeside Manufacturing about you too. Word spread. By the end of summer, I had more work than I could handle alone. I found myself wishing for Sarah's analytical mind or Mike's practical knowledge of mechanical systems. Then it hit me, why couldn't I bring them in as associates? Wilson wasn't the only company restructuring in our area. I called Sarah first. She answered on the first ring. Please tell me you need engineering help, she said instead of hello. Because I just found out my position is being consolidated next month. We met at a coffee shop near her house, where I outlined my vision for a collaborative consulting network. Not employees, I explained. Independent associates who bring specialized knowledge to specific projects. Lower overhead, higher quality, better work-life balance. So basically everything Wilson used to be before the corporate takeover, Sarah said with a wry smile. I'm in. With Sarah handling electrical systems and Mike joining later for mechanical expertise, we could take on more complex projects. I created a simple website showcasing our combined 7 decades of experience. The tagline, Knowledge You Can Trust. In September, I attended my first industry conference as an independent consultant rather than a Wilson representative. I felt oddly liberated wearing a simple blazer instead of branded company attire, carrying my own business cards rather than glossy corporate literature. During a panel discussion on water infrastructure challenges, I offered a comment about legacy system integration that sparked a conversation with the municipal engineer from Glenwood, a mid-sized city about 40 miles away. We've been struggling with exactly that issue, she said afterward. Our system was installed piecemeal over 30 years. Documentation is practically non-existent. That's actually my specialty, I replied. Deciphering the logic behind evolved systems. Over dinner, she described their situation in more detail. A water management system cobbled together from multiple eras of technology that no one fully understood anymore. Their longtime engineer had retired, taking decades of institutional knowledge with him. It sounded eerily familiar. We can't afford catastrophic failures, she emphasized. We're talking about public safety. By dessert, we'd outlined a knowledge capture and documentation project that would become my largest contract yet. One that would require additional expertise beyond what Sarah, Mike, and I could provide. That night in my hotel room, I sketched out a mentorship program concept. Many engineering graduates struggled to find that first position without practical experience. What if I could pair seasoned engineers with newcomers to the field? The veterans would share real-world knowledge while the juniors would bring fresh perspectives and technological fluency. I remembered my own early days, how much faster I'd developed under the guidance of old Frank Chambers, who'd taken the time to explain not just how things worked but why certain approaches were better than others. That kind of knowledge transfer couldn't be replaced by technical manuals or online tutorials. By November, I'd formalized the mentorship program and brought in 2 recent engineering graduates to work alongside us on the Glenwood project. Watching them absorb practical knowledge while contributing innovative solutions gave me a satisfaction I hadn't expected. Meanwhile, reports from former colleagues suggested Wilson Engineering was struggling. Quality complaints had doubled. Project timelines were slipping. The proprietary modeling software I'd developed was generating inconsistent results because no one understood the parameters that needed regular calibration. I took no pleasure in their difficulties, but I couldn't help reflecting on the irony. The cost savings of replacing experienced engineers with junior staff had resulted in expensive mistakes and damaged client relationships. Several long-term municipal contracts, relationships I'd personally cultivated over years, were up for renewal, and rumor had it the clients were exploring alternatives. One evening as I reviewed proposals at my home office desk, Linda brought me a cup of coffee and glanced at my calendar for the coming month. Every day was filled with client meetings, project reviews, and mentoring sessions. "You're busier than you ever were at Wilson," she observed. "The difference is it's on my terms now," I replied. "And I'm doing work that matters with people who value experience." She smiled, touching my shoulder gently. "From the ashes, something better." I nodded, thinking of the phoenix rising in the company logo Sarah had designed for us. From the ashes. It was just past 2 a.m. when my phone rang, jolting both Linda and me from sleep. Only one ringtone used that specific urgent tone, the emergency line I'd set up for critical infrastructure clients. "Jenkins," I answered, already reaching for the lamp. Tom, it's Jeff Anderson. His voice carried the unmistakable tension of a system operator facing a crisis. Jeff had been the night supervisor at the county water treatment facility for 15 years. We'd weathered many storms together when I was at Wilson. We've got a catastrophic failure in the primary distribution network. Pressure dropping throughout the grid. The failsafes aren't engaging properly. I sat up straight. Where's Wilson's team? A bitter laugh. Been trying to reach them for 2 hours. Got some kid on call who keeps running the same diagnostic tests over and over. Says he needs to consult with his supervisor who's on vacation in Florida. I was already pulling on jeans and a sweatshirt. What's your status? 20 minutes before we lose pressure to the hospital zone. Maybe an hour before residential areas see significant drops. If the main tanks drain completely, we're looking at a boil water advisory for days minimum. I'll be there in 15 minutes, I promised, kissing Linda's forehead as she mouthed, "Be careful," in the dim light. The roads were empty at that hour, letting me reach the facility in 12 minutes flat. Jeff met me at the security gate, his face lined with worry beneath the harsh parking lot lights. "Thanks for coming," he said, leading me briskly through the maze of buildings to the control center. "I know it's awkward with Wilson still technically holding the maintenance contract." "Water safety trumps contracts," I replied simply. The control room buzzed with nervous energy. 2 operators hunched over screens displaying a network diagram flashing with red warning indicators. A young man I didn't recognize stood behind them, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers. "That's Ethan," Jeff muttered. "One of your replacements." The kid couldn't have been more than 25, his dress shirt wrinkled from what had clearly become a longer shift than he'd anticipated. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Mr. Jenkins? What are you doing here?" "Jeff called me," I said, already moving toward the main system terminal. "Mind if I take a look?" Ethan hesitated, then stepped aside with visible relief. "Please. We've run every standard protocol twice. The automated recovery sequence isn't initializing correctly." I sat down at the familiar terminal, fingers automatically entering my old access credentials before remembering they'd surely been deactivated. "What's the current login?" Ethan leaned over and entered his credentials, then stepped back as I navigated through the system displays. The interface had been updated, sleeker with more graphical elements, but the underlying architecture was still mine. I could see the problem almost immediately. "Who authorized changes to the pressure threshold parameters?" I asked, pointing to values that were significantly different from the ones I'd established. "There was a system optimization project last month," Ethan explained. "The consultants said the old settings were too conservative, wasting energy." I shook my head, already entering commands to restore the emergency override protocols. Those conservative settings accounted for seasonal demand fluctuations and infrastructure aging factors. The system's rejecting the recovery sequence because the new parameters conflict with the embedded safety logic. Working quickly, I bypassed the conflicting parameters and initiated the manual recovery procedure. Something not documented in any manual but stored in my muscle memory from years of system development. Gradually, the warning indicators began changing from red to yellow. Pressure readings stabilized across most sectors. "You just saved us from a county-wide water emergency," Jeff said quietly. "Do you know how many homes would have lost service?" I nodded, the magnitude not lost on me. Thousands of people sleeping peacefully, unaware their morning routines had just been preserved. No news vans, no angry residents, no political fallout, because someone who understood the system had intervened in time. Ethan watched over my shoulder, taking notes furiously. "I didn't even know those command sequences existed," he admitted. "None of this is in our documentation." "That's because I built much of this system iteratively over years," I explained without rancor. Some solutions were implemented during crisis situations when there wasn't time for formal documentation updates. The young engineer looked genuinely distressed. "They told us the transition documentation was comprehensive." Before I could respond, the control room door burst open. A harried middle-aged man in an untucked button-down and khakis hurried in, followed by none other than the same younger man from the corporate team who had dismissed me with that half-laugh months ago. "What's the status of—" The newcomer stopped abruptly, recognizing me. "Jenkins?" What are you doing here? Preventing a major system failure, Jeff interjected before I could answer. Your team wasn't resolving the situation. The corporate representative, Bradley, I now recalled from my termination meeting, looked distinctly uncomfortable. This is highly irregular. Mr. Jenkins is no longer authorized to access these systems. The county has emergency provisions that allow us to call in qualified specialists during critical situations, Jeff countered. And Mr. Jenkins is certainly qualified. I stood up from the terminal, gesturing to the now stabilized system displays. The immediate crisis is contained, but you've got significant vulnerability because of the parameter changes made last month. They conflict with the core safety protocols. We'll handle it from here, Bradley said stiffly. I collected my jacket, pulling a business card from my wallet and handing it to Ethan. Call me if you have questions about the system architecture. No charge. The young engineer took it gratefully, ignoring Bradley's disapproving glare. As Jeff walked me out to my car, the eastern sky was just beginning to lighten. That corporate guy really doesn't like you, he observed. I represent everything his cost-cutting philosophy devalues, I replied. Experience. Institutional knowledge. Solutions that can't be quantified on a spreadsheet. Jeff leaned against my car door. The county commissioners are reviewing all our maintenance contracts next month. After tonight, I think they'll be asking some hard questions about Wilson's recent performance. I nodded, suddenly bone-tired as the adrenaline drained away. Just make sure they ask the right questions about knowledge transfer and system documentation, regardless of who gets the contract. Driving home in the pre-dawn light, I felt conflicted. The vindication of being proven right battled with genuine concern for the infrastructure I'd helped build and maintain for nearly 2 decades. People's safety depended on those systems working correctly. I wondered how many other modifications had been made without understanding their full implications. How many other time bombs were ticking away in systems I'd designed, now maintained by people who hadn't been properly prepared to inherit them. The moral dilemma was clear. Should I help the company that had discarded me so callously, or let them face the consequences of their decisions? There were no easy answers, only the weight of responsibility I'd carried for so long, a weight I realized I wasn't ready to set down regardless of who signed my paychecks. 3 days after the emergency at the water treatment facility, I received an email that made me spill my morning coffee. The sender, Alexander Peterson, CEO of Wilson Engineering. The subject line, urgent meeting request. What does he want? Linda asked, handing me a dish towel to mop up the spill. To talk, I said, scanning the brief message. Tomorrow at their office. Are you going? I considered the question carefully. Yes. But on my terms. I replied, suggesting we meet at a neutral location, the cafe across from the county administration building, rather than Wilson's offices. Peterson agreed almost immediately. The following morning I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered privacy without isolation. I ordered a black coffee and waited, watching the door. At exactly 9 a.m. Peterson walked in, followed by the CFO who had orchestrated my departure, Russell Chambers. My stomach tightened, but I kept my expression neutral as they approached. Tom, Peterson extended his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I shook it briefly, nodding to Chambers, who looked considerably less comfortable than he had during our last encounter. We have a situation, Peterson began after they'd settled and ordered their drinks. Following the incident at the treatment facility, the county has expressed concerns about our capacity to maintain critical infrastructure systems. Understandable, I replied evenly. Those systems protect public safety. Chambers cleared his throat. We've reviewed the incident reports. Your intervention prevented a significant service disruption. And potential regulatory violations, I added. Not to mention public health risks. Precisely, Peterson nodded. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. We'd like to discuss bringing you back to Wilson Engineering in a senior advisory capacity. I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. You're offering me my job back? Not exactly, Chambers interjected, ever the numbers man. We're proposing a consulting arrangement. Your expertise on legacy systems, available as needed at a premium rate structure. I studied them both carefully. Peterson looked genuinely concerned. He'd been a decent boss until the acquisition. Chambers was harder to read, his expression carefully controlled. Why not hire me back directly? I asked. Chambers shifted slightly. Our organizational restructuring is complete. The current staffing model is optimized for cost savings that aren't actually materializing, I finished for him. Because systems built on accumulated knowledge don't function efficiently when that knowledge walks out the door. Peterson winced. Tom, we made a mistake. I made a mistake letting the financial team dictate engineering decisions. But we need to move forward constructively. I took a sip of my coffee, buying time to organize my thoughts. I've built a consulting practice that's doing well. I have clients who value experience and are willing to pay for it. I have associates who share my commitment to quality engineering. We can match whatever rates you're charging elsewhere, Chambers offered quickly. It's not about the money, I replied, echoing what I'd told Linda months ago. It's about respect for expertise. About understanding that some things can't be quantified on a spreadsheet. Peterson nodded slowly. What would it take to bring you on board as a consultant? I laid out my terms clearly. Independent contractor status, premium rates with guaranteed minimum hours, and most importantly, a formal knowledge transfer program where I would work with their junior engineers to document the institutional knowledge they were missing. I won't be around forever, I explained. Neither will other senior engineers in the field. True succession planning means transferring not just responsibilities but understanding. Chambers looked like he'd bitten into something sour, but Peterson was nodding with increasing enthusiasm. We could make this a formal program, he suggested. A mentorship initiative that could eventually extend beyond our immediate needs. We hammered out the broad strokes of an agreement over the next hour. As we prepared to leave, Peterson asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. Why are you willing to help us after how things ended? I considered my answer carefully. Because the systems we're talking about serve our community. They provide clean water, safe roads, reliable infrastructure. That's always been more important to me than corporate politics. 2 weeks later, I walked back into Wilson Engineering for the first time since that fateful Friday morning. The receptionist, a new face I didn't recognize, directed me to the main conference room where I found Ethan and 2 other junior engineers waiting anxiously. Mr. Jenkins, Ethan greeted me with obvious relief. Thank you for coming. Call me Tom, I replied, setting down my briefcase. We're going to be working together a lot. Over the next few months, I split my time between my growing consulting practice and the knowledge transfer project at Wilson. I brought Sarah in to document the electrical systems, and we developed comprehensive manuals that captured not just the how but the why behind critical infrastructure decisions. At an industry conference that fall, I encountered a familiar face at the networking reception. One of the 3 juniors Peterson had referenced during my termination. James Chin had since moved on to another firm, but his expression when he spotted me was one of genuine respect. Mr. Jenkins, he approached hesitantly. I owe you an apology. I was part of the team that was supposed to replace you. No apology necessary, I assured him. You weren't making the decisions. Maybe not, but I was arrogant enough to think it would be easy, he admitted. I learned the hard way that engineering isn't just about technical skills. It's about context and experience. I ended up inviting James to join our mentorship program as both a mentee and junior mentor. His perspective as someone who had experienced both sides of the knowledge gap proved invaluable. By the 1-year anniversary of my termination, my consulting practice had expanded to include 6 associates, all experienced engineers sharing their knowledge. We'd launched a formal apprenticeship program in partnership with the local community college, pairing veteran engineers with promising students. Linda found me in my home office one evening, looking through photos from our recent open house for prospective engineering students. You look happier than you have in years, she observed. Who would have thought getting fired would be the best thing to happen to you? I smiled, thinking about the journey of the past year. It wasn't about revenge or proving them wrong, I realized. It was about finding where I could make the most difference. The phone rang, my business line, and I checked the caller ID. Another municipality with aging infrastructure in need of expertise that couldn't be replaced by youth or algorithms. Another opportunity to build something that would last. I never thought the system would run without me, I told Linda as I reached for the phone. But I never imagined I'd be building something better instead.